of the referendum question. So it's no longer a say no, it's a stay in or leave. Has that?
Well, great. I mean, look, the Electoral Commission, who have failed utterly in everything they've done since 2001, for the first time have done the right thing. And why? Because 1,000 UKIP members wrote to them. And that's written in their submission. 1,000 UKIP members wrote to say that two things really. Firstly, that the question only gave one option. And secondly, that the yes v no, positive v negative thing worked against the come outside. And you see, actually, if you think about it, I've been saying now for some months that the yes campaign are busy. Every single day we get some ghastly person like Tony Blair or Lord Mandelson or Richard Branson saying we must vote to stay in the European Union. It's really important, and by the way, we should join the Euro too. And the No campaign were doing nothing because they're waiting, because they're Tories. They're waiting to see the extent of the Prime Minister's renegotiation. So I've been pushing now for some time to say, look, there's no point waiting. He's not renegotiating anything fundamental at all. Let's get cracking. So no, I think we're in the right place.
Your impact on the referendum campaign is one that has led to a lot of debate in Westminster, not least this morning, which seemed to me a conveniently timed sort of double-headed attack in the Telegraph and the Spectator of a poll that the fieldwork for the poll took place in early May. I mean, how do you respond to things like that? Or do you just not?
Well, look, the posh boys, who've never had a job, come straight from Oxbridge into politics, who are generally too cowardly to take on the really big issues of the day, think they should be the top dogs in this referendum campaign. Well, I'm very happy to work with them, but the idea that any of them could lead anything, I mean, I wouldn't let most of them run a bath, frankly. They're not people who are connected or grounded with the real world. So look, they have a go at me and they produce a poll. Their line, of course, is Farage is toxic. Well, at least the public have heard of me. Who's ever heard of any of that?
That sort of leads us on to the different campaigns as well. People have heard from a lot of different campaigns. I've just spoken to somebody from the campaign for Independent Britain. There's the For Britain campaign. There's the No, spelled K-N-O-W. You've spoken about the benefits of having a wide range of views and the fact that you will work with anyone. Are there any negatives to having such a diverse field of out campaigns?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If there is a fisherman's campaign against the EU, that's great. It targets the fisherman. If there's a housewives campaign against the EU, that targets the housewife. If there's a UKIP campaign against the EU, well, that targets UKIP voters, non-voters, Labour voters, who will be appalled when Corbyn becomes the leader.
Specifically, which Labour vote are you talking about there?
Well, there are two Labour votes, as I see it. There is a left-wing, traditional socialist Labour vote, and make no mistake, I mean, Corbyn will not collapse the Labour vote overnight, because he'll get the Green vote. I mean, come on. He rides a bicycle. He's got a beard. Well, you have too, but he rides a bicycle. He's got a beard, and he's a vegan teetotaler. So there's no point voting Green anymore because you've got your man. There are many on the hard left in this country haven't voted for years. They'll vote for him. But what I do see is an old Labour vote, traditional, family orientated. Immensely, and this may sound funny to metropolitan viewers, but immensely proud of the contributions their families have made in 2 world wars. Good, blooming decent people who voted Labour because they've always thought Labour was on their side, and they will look at Corbyn as a friend of Jerry Adams.
Do you think that also extends to the Labour families, Labour voting families out there whose sons and daughters served in the Falklands, in the Iraq War?
I mean, look, I went to a school in South London where on our war memorial there are the names of 852 old boys killed in 2 world wars, and we were dragged up with this. 6 Victoria Crosses, 1 George Cross. I was dragged up with this stuff. And I believed when I was a boy in the 70s that it was very, very important. By about 1990, that generation after me didn't think it was very important. And it was falling into sort of disrepair as an idea that one could believe in. I think the sad irony of Afghanistan and Iraq is that now the entire population connects with the concept of service people being killed, maimed, wounded. And I have to say, it is an irony for me. I was a strong opponent of the Iraq War. I saw it as Bush's vengeance without any proper reasoning or meaning. If one good thing has come out of it, it is that at least we now have more respect for our military, our traditions, and what our families have sacrificed than we've had for at least 30 years.
In terms of public opinion, not necessarily from people out in Westminster.
Oh, well, no. I mean, Westminster and public opinion have diverged for years. I think the growth of UKIP's proved that. I also think that the growth of Corbyn's proved that. I mean, look, forget the politics of it. Forget what I agree with him on or disagree with him on. I agree with almost nothing. But what's he done in this campaign? He's engaged people who weren't members of the Labour Party. He's engaged people who think, hey, this guy actually believes in things. And one of the reasons I loathe EU membership is that it completely stultifies our view on policy, our view on ability of what we can do. One of the founder members of UKIP was a guy called Gerald Roberts. He's dead now. And Gerald was a Wickhamist, socialist, economist, very left-wing, lovely man, very left-wing. And he and I would argue in the pub after UKIP NECs in the early days of the 90s. And we'd argue about policy furiously. In the end, Gerald said, right, I've got a solution. It's twofold. Firstly, we should agree that UKIP believes we have the right to mismanage our own country, and that rather appealed to me. And secondly, there is no point in you and I having a row over a pint if the Westminster Parliament is impotent to deal with the issues. And that's the point. And the reason that I've said today that I would welcome Jeremy Corbyn onto a platform with me is this isn't about left or right. It isn't about agreeing or disagreeing. It's about, do we have a sovereign country that has the ability to agree and a Supreme Court that is supreme? And that's why this referendum is the most important constitutional question I'm going to face in my lifetime.
And that brings us on to one of the issues that we seem to have lost control over, and that's the big topic of the day: migration, refugees, asylum seekers. But I don't want to ask you the questions you've been asked all morning. I actually want to pick up on some of the very interesting things that you raised in your speech earlier today. You said that in terms of motivating factors, was it 95% of people that are coming into or trying to get into Europe?
Well, what I said was
economic
this.
migrants?
Hang on. What I said was this: that the traditional definition of refugee, reaffirmed by the 1951 UN Convention on Refugee Status, was that a refugee is an individual who fears persecution because of their race, their class, their political views, and to update it, perhaps sexual orientation as well. Okay? So it is an individual believing that because of what he or she is, they will be persecuted for that view. And I think that what the European Union has done, and goodness me, I tried my best in April, 9 days before a general election, to go to Strasbourg to confront and deal with Mr. Juncker, the Commission President. They've now set the bounds for what qualifies for asylum refugee status so wide that it goes not just beyond personal persecution, it goes to living in war-torn areas. Indeed, as Juncker said, it includes extreme poverty. So what the European Union is saying is, of the world's population of 6 billion, 4 billion could qualify. It's absolutely crackers. We can't deal with a system like this. And what's worse than the definition is the reality, which is all you have to do is set foot inside a European Union country and you can stay. Now, please, no one looking at this, misinterpret me. I am not saying that we should not help people in genuine need. Indeed, my own forebears were French Protestants, Huguenots, who came to Britain. 50,000 of them came over 100 years to Britain. And this country was very welcoming to Jewish people from Russia in the early 20th century, to Jewish people in the 30s and 40s who came from Germany and Austria, Ugandan Asians in the 70s who famously became the most successful group of migrants ever to come to Britain in our history. I don't need lecturing by Chancellor Merkel or anybody about our duties and responsibilities. We get this. What I'm saying is we're not getting the definition of who is a refugee right. And what I said today, it wasn't me, although I observed, as I drive through Calais every week, they're mostly young men, between sort of 15 and 30. I was quoting Robert Fico, who is the Prime Minister of Slovakia, who said the leaders of the European Union are not being honest about who's coming. 95% of those who come are economic migrants. And my worry is this. One photograph can be enormously powerful. And, history shows us that. It's funny, isn't it? 71 people die and are discovered rotting in a truck in Austria. And kind of we all say, oh, okay, fine. One photograph of a young 3-year-old boy being taken from the sea in Turkey by a police officer, and a very poignant picture. And suddenly that photograph changes our whole approach to migration and what we should be doing. And the cry goes up, something must be done. I've got 4 kids. I'm not some sort of cold-hearted right-winger. I get it. I understand it. I share with everybody the horror, the abomination that is that picture. But we have to let our short-term emotional reaction be overcome by a more considered view, which is, how do we stop more pictures of 3-year-old kids being dragged dead out of the Mediterranean? Do we do it by a European policy that says that anyone that comes can be accepted? Do we do it by what Chancellor Merkel has done this week, by saying, please, come, anyone come? We'll take 800,000. And by the way, I promise you, I'll bully my neighbours into taking even more. I think that misguided EU policy, which I tried to point out in April, and what Merkel has done this week, which has compounded it by a factor of 3 or 4, means that actually, and I'm sorry to say this, but it's true, we will see more photographs of young kids being dragged dead out of the Mediterranean, and more stories about lorries, being filled with people who've suffocated, or whatever it is. Every single one of these factors is playing into the hands of the criminal gangs, the traffickers, and dare I say it, even ISIS too.
Just finally, to wrap up, you mentioned Calais.
Mm.
We haven't heard that much about Calais in the last few weeks. The focus has really been on the Mediterranean, Hungary, Austria, so forth. You've been through Calais a countless number of times in the last...
Including yesterday.
Right. I mean, what is the situation in Calais now? Because actually the media is not telling us.
Look, we are opted out of the Schengen Agreement, which is why most people